My name is Eleanor Ross. I'm 73 years old, and I learned a long time ago that silence can be the most powerful weapon a mother possesses. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the kind of silence I would choose on that crisp October afternoon when my son called with news that should have filled me with joy. "Mom, I have something to tell you." His voice carried that peculiar mixture of excitement and nervousness that I'd heard only a handful of times in his 42 years. Once when he got accepted to Stanford, once when he proposed to his first girlfriend. That relationship lasted 3 months. And now, apparently, for this. I set down my gardening shears, wiped the soil from my hands onto my apron, and settled into the wicker chair on my back porch. The afternoon sun filtered through the maple leaves, creating patterns of light and shadow across the weathered wooden planks. I'd built this house with my late husband Robert 35 years ago. Every nail, every board, every decision had been ours together. After he passed 8 years ago, I'd maintained it alone, not because I couldn't afford help, but because the work kept me connected to him. "I'm listening, Daniel," I said, keeping my voice warm but neutral. Mothers develop a sixth sense about their children's tones. Something in his voice told me to brace myself. "I'm going to be a father." The words tumbled out in a rush. "She's already due next month." I felt the world tilt slightly, the way it does when you stand up too quickly or receive news that doesn't quite compute. My son, my careful, methodical engineer son, who color-coded his closet and planned his meals a week in advance, was announcing a pregnancy with apparently 1 month's notice? "That's unexpected," I said carefully. "Congratulations, sweetheart. When do I get to meet her? The mother of my first grandchild?" There was a pause. Too long. The kind of silence that fills with meaning. "At the hospital, Mom. When the baby comes." I didn't respond immediately. The maple leaves rustled in the breeze, and somewhere down the street, children were laughing as they played. Normal sounds for a normal day that was rapidly becoming anything but. "I see," I finally said, my voice steady despite the questions multiplying in my mind like rabbits. "And her name?" "Jessica. Jessica Martin." "How long have you known her, Daniel?" Another pause. "About 8 months." 8 months. Pregnant and due next month meant she was 8 months along, which meant, I did the mathematics quickly, he'd known her exactly as long as she'd been carrying his child, or very close to it. "That's quite a whirlwind," I said, still maintaining that careful, neutral tone. "I assume you're planning to be involved in the child's life?" "Of course, Mom. I'm going to be there for everything. I'm setting up the nursery in my apartment right now. I've been reading all these books about infant development but you're not introducing her to your family until she's in labor." The statement hung between us like a challenge. I heard him exhale slowly. "It's complicated, Mom." "I'm 73, Daniel. I've lived through complicated. Try me." "Jessica. She's very private. She doesn't want a lot of pressure or expectations right now. The pregnancy has been stressful, and she just wants to focus on staying healthy and calm until the baby arrives." Every word sounded rehearsed, practiced, like he'd been preparing for this conversation, anticipating my questions, crafting his responses. My son, who couldn't lie to save his life as a child, had apparently learned the skill somewhere along the way. "And after the baby arrives?" I asked. "Will she be less private then?" "We'll figure it out, Mom. I just need you to trust me on this. Can you do that?" Could I? I looked around my garden, at the roses I'd pruned and the vegetables I'd cultivated, and the little stone path Robert and I had laid together one summer when Daniel was just 7 years old. Trust had always been the foundation of our family, but trust required honesty, and something about this entire situation felt fundamentally dishonest. "Of course I trust you," I said, because what else could I say? "Just tell me when and where, and I'll be there." "Thanks, Mom. I knew you'd understand." But I didn't understand. Not at all. After we hung up, I sat in that wicker chair for another hour, watching the sun sink lower and the shadows grow longer. I thought about calling my sister Margaret, or my friend Helen from book club, but something stopped me. Some instinct told me to keep this close, to wait and watch and see what revealed itself. Daniel had always been my miracle. I'd suffered 3 miscarriages before him, each loss carving out a piece of my heart. When he finally arrived, healthy and screaming and perfect, I'd promised myself I would give him everything: love, stability, opportunity, wisdom. His father and I had worked ourselves to the bone to provide the kind of life we'd never had. Robert worked as a civil engineer, designing bridges and infrastructure, often taking extra projects to build our savings. I'd taught high school mathematics for 37 years, every single day, never missing a parent-teacher conference or a school play or a baseball game. We hadn't been wealthy, but we'd been comfortable. More than comfortable, actually. Robert had been brilliant with investments, turning our modest savings into something substantial. When he died, he'd left me very well provided for. The house paid off, a robust retirement account, and a stock portfolio that had only grown in value over the years. Daniel knew about some of it. He knew the house was paid off, knew I lived comfortably on my pension and Social Security. But he didn't know about the investment accounts, the stocks, the bonds, the careful accumulation of wealth that Robert and I had built together. We'd never been ostentatious people. I drove a 12-year-old sedan, shopped at the same grocery store I'd been going to for decades, wore clothes until they wore out. The money was there for security, for emergencies, and, I'd always assumed, for Daniel and his future family. I'd imagined helping with a down payment on a house, contributing to my grandchildren's education funds, being the grandmother who could take the family on special vacations or help out when unexpected expenses arose. But now, facing the reality of a grandchild arriving in a month to a woman I'd never met, I felt the first stirrings of something cold and cautious in my chest, something that whispered, "Wait, watch, don't show all your cards." The next few weeks passed in a strange limbo. Daniel called weekly with updates. The nursery was ready, he'd installed a car seat, he'd taken an infant CPR class, but never once did he mention bringing Jessica to meet me. Never once did he suggest a dinner or even a phone call. I didn't push. I simply listened, asked appropriate questions, and kept my growing concerns to myself. Then, on a rainy Tuesday evening in early November, my phone rang at 11:47 p.m. "Mom, it's happening. We're at St. Mary's Hospital. She's in labor." I was out of bed instantly, adrenaline overriding the stiffness in my joints. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. The hospital's maternity ward had that peculiar atmosphere of hushed urgency that hospitals always carry at night. Bright lights, quiet voices, the occasional cry of a newborn echoing down the hallways. I found Daniel in the waiting area, pacing like a caged animal, his hair sticking up in several directions. "How is she?" I asked, pulling him into a hug. "In delivery now. They said it could be another hour or 2. First babies usually take a while." He was reciting facts like they could anchor him to something solid. "And you're out here?" She wanted her mother with her, in the delivery room. I absorbed this quietly. The mother of his child wanted her own mother present, but not the father of her child. Interesting. "That's understandable," I said, though I wasn't sure it was. First-time mothers often want their mothers with them. We sat together in those uncomfortable waiting room chairs beneath fluorescent lights that made everything look slightly unreal. Daniel fidgeted constantly, checking his phone, standing up, sitting down, walking to the vending machine and back without buying anything. "Tell me about her," I said finally. "About Jessica." She's great, Mom. Really great. She works in marketing for a tech company. She's smart, organized, driven. She has her own apartment in the city, nice place. We met at a friend's party last Christmas. So they'd known each other longer than he'd initially implied. The small inconsistency stuck in my mind like a burr. And the pregnancy was planned? He looked uncomfortable. Not exactly planned, but not unwelcome. We were dating, things were going well, and then she found out, and we decided to make it work. Make it work was such a peculiar phrase for bringing a child into the world, but I simply nodded, patted his hand, and waited. At 2:34 a.m., a nurse emerged with a smile. "You have a beautiful baby girl, 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Both mother and baby are doing wonderfully." Daniel's face transformed with pure joy, and despite all my concerns, I felt my own heart leap. A granddaughter. I had a granddaughter. "Can we see them?" Daniel asked eagerly. "Let's give them a few minutes to get settled, and then absolutely." Those few minutes stretched into 20, then 30. Daniel grew increasingly anxious, checking with the nurses' station twice. Finally, we were allowed back. The room was dimly lit, peaceful, and in the bed, looking exhausted but radiant, was a young woman I'd never seen before, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in pink hospital blankets. "Jessica, this is my mom, Eleanor," Daniel said softly, moving to stand beside the bed, his eyes never leaving the baby. Jessica looked up at me, and I saw her assess me in a single sweep. My comfortable slacks and sweater, my sensible shoes, my unadorned hands, my simple silver watch. I watched her categorize me, file me away, and apparently find me acceptable enough to acknowledge. "Nice to meet you," she said, her voice hoarse from labor. She was pretty, probably in her early 30s, with blonde hair currently pulled back in a messy ponytail and the kind of delicate features that photographed well. "Congratulations," I said warmly, stepping closer. "She's absolutely beautiful. What's her name?" "Sophia," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "Sophia Rose. Rose. My middle name. A peace offering, perhaps, or perhaps just coincidence. May I?" I gestured toward the baby. Jessica's arms tightened almost imperceptibly around Sophia, but then she nodded and carefully transferred the tiny bundle to Daniel, who in turn brought her to me. The moment I held my granddaughter, I understood every cliché every grandmother had ever spoken. She was perfect, absolutely perfect. Tiny fingers, rosebud mouth, the soft fontanelle beneath a cap of dark hair. She had Daniel's nose, I thought, and maybe Robert's chin. "Hello, beautiful girl," I whispered. "Your grandma is very happy to meet you." I looked up to find Jessica watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not hostile, but not warm either. Evaluating, measuring. I stayed for about an hour, holding Sophia, while Daniel and Jessica dealt with various nurses and forms and administrative tasks. I watched how they interacted, carefully, politely, but without the easy intimacy I would have expected from a couple about to embark on parenthood together. They seemed more like friendly co-workers coordinating on a project than partners building a family. When I finally left, promising to visit again soon, I drove home through the empty pre-dawn streets with questions multiplying in my mind like cells dividing. Over the next 3 weeks, I visited the hospital twice more, each time bringing small gifts, a handmade blanket I'd crocheted, some practical items like baby washcloths and onesies. Each time, Jessica was polite but distant, and each time, I noticed little things. She never mentioned her family beyond her mother, who I never actually met, despite supposedly being present for the delivery. She deflected every question about her background with practiced ease, redirecting conversation to Sophia or asking me about my life in a way that seemed designed to avoid revealing her own. She watched Daniel with an expression that seemed more calculating than affectionate. And most tellingly, when I offered to help with anything, meals, laundry, babysitting, she declined quickly, almost reflexively. "We're managing fine," she'd say. "Daniel's been wonderful." After they left the hospital and settled into Daniel's apartment, the visits became even more controlled. I was allowed to come on Sunday afternoons for exactly 2 hours, no more, no less. Jessica would time it, I noticed, glancing at her phone with increasing frequency as the 2-hour mark approached. I brought this up with Daniel during one of our phone calls. "She's just trying to establish a routine," he explained. "Babies need routine, and having visitors can be disruptive." "I'm not a visitor, Daniel. I'm your mother, Sophia's grandmother." "I know, Mom, but Jessica is doing most of the childcare right now since she's on maternity leave, and she just needs some structure and boundaries." Boundaries. That word again. It was during my 4th Sunday visit, about 6 weeks after Sophia was born, that I first met Dr. Patricia Chen. I'd arrived exactly at 2:00 p.m. as specified, carrying a bag of groceries I'd picked up for them, formula, diapers, some easy-to-prepare meals. Jessica answered the door, looking harried, her hair unwashed, wearing pajamas at mid-afternoon. "Oh, Eleanor, right, Sunday." She seemed to have forgotten, which was unusual given how strictly she normally monitored our visits. "Is this a bad time? I can come back?" No, it's fine. Actually, Dr. Chen is here, Sophia's pediatrician, just a routine checkup." I followed her into the living room, where a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor was examining Sophia on a blanket spread across the coffee table. "Everything looks perfect," Dr. Chen was saying to Daniel, who hovered nearby. "She's gained weight beautifully, her reflexes are excellent, all her developmental markers are right on track." "Dr. Chen, this is Daniel's mother, Eleanor," Jessica said, her tone neutral. Dr. Chen looked up and smiled. "Wonderful to meet you. You must be so thrilled with this beautiful granddaughter." "Beyond thrilled," I said honestly. "She's my first grandchild." "Well, you're lucky. She's a remarkably healthy baby." Dr. Chen finished her examination, making notes in a tablet. "I'll see you again in a month for her 2-month checkup. But if anything concerns you before then, don't hesitate to call." As Dr. Chen packed up her medical bag, I moved to the kitchen area to put away the groceries I'd brought, trying to give them space for any final questions. But in the small apartment, I could still hear their conversation clearly. "Before I go," Dr. Chen said, her voice dropping slightly, "I wanted to ask about the other matter we discussed last time, the genetic screening." I froze, a can of formula halfway to the cupboard. "We decided against it," Jessica said quickly. "Everything's been fine, and we just didn't see the need." "I understand it's a personal choice," Dr. Chen replied carefully. "But given the family history you mentioned, the genetic counselor did recommend it. It's non-invasive, just a simple blood draw from Sophia, and it could provide important information about—" "We've decided no," Daniel interrupted, his voice firm in a way I rarely heard. "Thank you for the recommendation, but we're comfortable with our decision." There was a brief pause, and then Dr. Chen's professional voice returned. "Of course, as I said, it's entirely your choice. I just wanted to make sure you had all the information." After Dr. Chen left, I continued unpacking groceries with hands that had started to tremble slightly. Genetic screening, family history. What family history? Daniel was healthy, I was healthy, Robert had been healthy until the heart attack that took him. What genetic concerns could possibly warrant screening? I finished in the kitchen and returned to the living room where Jessica was nursing Sophia and Daniel was tidying up the examination area. "Is everything all right?" I asked casually. I couldn't help overhearing about genetic screening. Jessica's eyes snapped to mine, sharp and assessing. Daniel jumped in quickly. "It's nothing, Mom. Just routine stuff doctors recommend. We decided against it because Sophia's perfectly healthy." "But the doctor mentioned family history." "It's standard questions they ask everyone," Jessica said smoothly, adjusting Sophia's position. "They cast a wide net. Most of it doesn't apply to us." The answer was too practiced, too smooth, and the look that passed between Daniel and Jessica was loaded with meaning I couldn't decipher. I stayed for my allotted 2 hours, playing with Sophia when she was awake, making small talk about nothing important. But my mind was elsewhere, turning over this new piece of information, like a stone in my pocket. That evening, I did something I'm not particularly proud of. I called Margaret, my sister, who'd been a medical records administrator for 30 years before retiring. "Maggie, if a pediatrician recommends genetic screening for a newborn, what would that typically indicate?" "Well, lots of things could trigger it," Margaret said thoughtfully. "Known genetic conditions in the family, things like cystic fibrosis, sickle cell, Tay-Sachs if there's Ashkenazi heritage, some metabolic disorders. Why? Is this about Daniel's baby?" "Maybe. The pediatrician mentioned it, but Daniel and Jessica declined." "That's their right. But Eleanor, If the doctor is pushing it, there's usually a reason. Has Jessica disclosed her full medical history to you? I don't know her medical history. I barely know Jessica at all. Margaret was quiet for a moment. That's strange, isn't it? She's the mother of your grandchild, and you barely know her? Very strange, I agreed. Eleanor, I don't want to alarm you, but my professional instinct says something's off here. Doctors don't push genetic screening without cause, and keeping you at arm's length while raising your grandchild, I don't like it. Neither did I. Over the next several weeks, I became more observant during my Sunday visits. I noticed that Jessica's apartment, which Daniel had described as nice, was actually quite upscale. The building had a doorman, the apartment itself had high ceilings and expensive finishes, and the furniture was designer quality. I noticed that Jessica wore a very expensive watch, that her diaper bag was Louis Vuitton, that the stroller in the corner probably cost more than my monthly pension check. I noticed that she never mentioned work, even though she'd supposedly been in marketing, never mentioned returning to her job, never took work calls, never seemed remotely concerned about maternity leave ending. And I noticed that Daniel looked increasingly tired and stressed. He'd lost weight, had dark circles under his eyes, and jumped whenever Jessica spoke to him with a particular sharp tone she used when she wanted something. During my 10th Sunday visit, when Sophia was about 3 months old, I arrived to find Daniel alone with the baby. "Where's Jessica?" I asked, settling onto the couch with Sophia in my arms. "She had some things to take care of. She'll be back later." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Daniel." I waited until he looked at me. "What's really going on here?" "What do you mean?" "I mean this whole situation. You keep me at arm's length. Jessica treats me like a stranger who might contaminate her daughter. You look exhausted and stressed, and now there are medical recommendations you're declining without explanation." He sat down heavily in the chair across from me. For a long moment, he just stared at his hands. "It's complicated, Mom." "You keep saying that. I'm asking you to uncomplicate it for me." "I can't." "Can't or won't. Both." He looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. My capable, confident son was afraid. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" "No." "Yes. I don't know." He ran his hands through his hair. "I just need you to trust that I'm handling it, okay?" "Handling what, Daniel?" But before he could answer, the apartment door opened and Jessica walked in, carrying shopping bags from expensive stores. Her eyes immediately went to Sophia in my arms, then to Daniel's defeated posture, then back to me with an expression that had gone from neutral to hostile in a heartbeat. "I didn't realize you were still here," she said to me, though my 2 hours weren't up yet. "Daniel, didn't you say you needed to run those errands this afternoon?" It was a clear dismissal. I stood, kissed Sophia's downy head, and handed her to Jessica. "Same time next week?" I asked, keeping my voice pleasant. "Actually, the next few weeks are going to be busy," Jessica said smoothly. "We'll call you." I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to contradict her, to assert that his mother was welcome to visit his daughter. But he just stood there, silent and miserable. "I see," I said quietly. "Well, you know where to find me." I left, but the fear I'd seen in Daniel's eyes haunted me all the way home. 3 weeks passed without a call. I texted Daniel several times, brief, cheerful messages asking about Sophia, offering to help, suggesting lunch. His responses were apologetic but evasive. They were figuring things out. Things were hectic. They'd definitely call soon. I was gardening on a Thursday afternoon when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Ross, this is Dr. Patricia Chen. We met briefly at your son's apartment." My heart jumped. "Is Sophia all right?" "Sophia is fine, perfectly healthy. But Mrs. Ross, I'm calling because I feel I have an ethical obligation to share something with you, though it puts me in a somewhat difficult position professionally." I set down my gardening tools and sat on my porch steps. "I'm listening." "I've been Sophia's pediatrician since birth, and in the course of routine medical history intake, Jessica Martin provided information about family medical history. Specifically, she indicated that there were genetic concerns on the paternal side of the family. The paternal side? You mean Daniel's side? My side? Yes. She specifically mentioned a history of a rare genetic disorder that would warrant screening. When I researched further and tried to discuss it with them, they became defensive and declined all genetic testing. My mind raced. Dr. Chen, there is no genetic disorder in my family. My husband and I, our parents, our siblings, we're all clear. Daniel has never had any health issues beyond normal childhood illnesses. There was a long pause. That's what I suspected, which is why I'm calling. Mrs. Ross, I believe Jessica Martin may have provided false medical information. I can't say why, but in my professional experience, when parents lie about genetic history and refuse appropriate screening, it's often because they're hiding something about the child's true parentage. The words hit me like a physical blow. Parentage. True parentage. You think Daniel might not be Sophia's father? I think it's a possibility worth considering. And Mrs. Ross, I'm telling you this because I've seen situations like this before. If Daniel is unaware, if he's being deceived, he has a right to know. And if he does know and is going along with it for some reason, then you have a right to understand what you're walking into as a supposed grandparent. After I hung up, I sat on those porch steps for over an hour, watching the sun move across my garden while my mind raced through implications and possibilities. If Sophia wasn't Daniel's daughter, why would he claim her? Money? But Daniel made good money as an engineer. He didn't need financial support, unless Jessica had something else on him. Was she blackmailing him somehow? Threatening him? Or, and this thought made my stomach turn, was he so desperate for a family that he'd willingly accept another man's child and pretend she was his own? I thought about that fear I'd seen in his eyes, the weight loss, the stress, the way he jumped when Jessica used that sharp tone. And I thought about Jessica's expensive apartment, her designer clothes, her complete lack of concern about returning to work, about how carefully she controlled every interaction between Daniel and me, about how she'd shut down the genetic testing that would have revealed the truth. I needed proof, and I needed to be very, very careful about how I got it. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Thomas Bradford, who'd handled Robert's estate and had been our family attorney for 20 years. Tom, I need your advice on a delicate matter. Hypothetically, if someone suspected a child wasn't their biological grandchild, what would be their options? Tom was quiet for a moment. Eleanor, this isn't about Sophia, is it? Answer the question hypothetically, Tom. Hypothetically, the cleanest option would be a paternity test, but you'd need DNA from both the alleged father and the child. Are we still speaking hypothetically? For now. Eleanor, be very careful. If you're wrong, this kind of thing can destroy a family. And if you're right, it might destroy one anyway. I understand, but I need to know the truth. Then you need samples. Cheek swabs are easiest, but hair with roots attached can work, or even a used toothbrush in some cases. There are discreet labs that handle this sort of thing. After hanging up with Tom, I sat at my kitchen table and planned. I had one chance to get this right, and I couldn't afford to tip my hand too early. Sunday came with no call from Daniel. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday passed in silence. On Thursday, I called his cell phone and it went straight to voicemail. Daniel, it's your mother. I haven't heard from you in almost a month. I miss you and I miss Sophia terribly. Please call me back. If something's wrong, if you're in some kind of trouble, I want to help. I love you. He called back 2 hours later. Mom, I'm sorry. Things have just been crazy. Too crazy to call your mother? Too crazy to let me see my granddaughter? Jessica thinks... He stopped himself. Jessica thinks what? She thinks maybe we should have some space for a while. Let us establish our family unit without outside influences. Outside influences. His own mother was an outside influence. Daniel, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Are you in some kind of trouble? Are you being pressured or threatened or manipulated? Mom, no, it's nothing like that. Jessica just has strong opinions about how she wants to raise Sophia. And what about how you want to raise her? Do you get a vote? Silence. "I'm her father," he said finally, but there was something hollow in the words. "Are you?" The question hung between us like a live wire. "What kind of question is that?" His voice was strangled. "A direct one. Are you Sophia's biological father, Daniel?" Mom, you can't just... That's incredibly insulting to Jessica." Notice what he didn't say. He didn't say yes. "I want to see you," I said. "Just you, tomorrow. Lunch at that diner near your office." "I don't think..." "Daniel Robert Morrison, I am your mother, and I am asking you to have lunch with me. 1 hour. That's all." After a long pause, he agreed. The next day, I arrived at the diner 15 minutes early and chose a booth in the back corner where we could talk privately. Daniel arrived exactly on time, looking worse than I'd ever seen him, gaunt, exhausted, defeated. He slid into the booth across from me and wouldn't meet my eyes. "Tell me the truth," I said without preamble. "All of it." And finally, after months of evasion and half-truths, my son began to talk. "I met Jessica at a party last December, like I said. We hit it off. She was beautiful, successful, interesting. We started dating. About 2 months in, she told me she was pregnant." 2 months? But you said you'd known her 8 months when you called me." I lied. I was embarrassed. "I knew how it would look." "Go on." "She said the baby was mine. We'd been together. It was possible. She said she wanted to keep it, and did I want to be involved? I said yes. I wanted to be involved. I wanted..." His voice cracked. "I wanted a family, Mom. I'm 42 years old. I'd been alone for so long." "But you had doubts." He nodded miserably. "Little things didn't add up. Her timeline was vague. She wouldn't let me come to early doctor's appointments. She kept me at a distance from her life. And then, when Sophia was born..." The genetic screening. Dr. Chen asked about family history, and Jessica told her there were genetic concerns on my side, which made no sense because there aren't any. I confronted Jessica about it, and she said she must have misspoken, but Dr. Chen kept pushing for the screening. That's when I knew for sure. Knew what? That Sophia probably isn't mine, biologically. The confirmation, even though I'd suspected, still hit hard. "Have you confirmed it? Tested?" "No, because Jessica made it clear that if I pushed for a paternity test, she'd disappear with Sophia. Cut me out completely. And Mom, even if she's not mine biologically, I love her. I love that little girl. She's the only family I have. You have me. And Jessica said if I stayed close to you, you'd eventually figure it out. You'd push for testing. You'd ruin everything. So she made me choose, Sophia or you." I felt rage building in my chest, cold and controlled, and absolutely certain. This woman had manipulated my son, isolated him from his family, and was using an infant as leverage to maintain her deception. "Why?" I asked. "Why would she do this? What does she gain?" Daniel laughed bitterly. "A father for her child, someone responsible and stable. Someone who makes good money and won't ask too many questions because he's desperate enough to accept the situation." "Who's the real father?" "I don't know. She won't say. But I've pieced some things together from things she's let slip. I think he was wealthy, married, probably someone who couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge the child." "So she found you, a good man who wanted a family badly enough to live a lie." He nodded, tears streaming down his face now. "I know how pathetic that sounds, but Mom, when I hold Sophia, when she smiles at me, when she falls asleep on my chest, I don't care whose DNA she has. She's mine in every way that matters." I reached across the table and took his hands. "Daniel, she's using you, and she's using that beautiful baby as a weapon to keep you in line. That's not love. That's abuse." "What am I supposed to do? If I challenge her, I lose Sophia completely." "Maybe legally, maybe temporarily, but sweetheart, you can't build a life on lies and manipulation. And what happens when Sophia gets older? When she starts asking questions? When she wants to know about her heritage, her medical history?" "I don't know. I just know I can't lose her. I drove home from that lunch feeling like I'd aged a decade. My son was trapped in a situation of his own desperate making, being controlled by a woman who saw him as a useful tool rather than a partner. And my granddaughter, my supposed granddaughter, was a pawn in whatever game Jessica was playing. That night, I called Tom Bradford again. Tom, not hypothetically anymore. I need to know what Daniel's rights are. If he's been claiming paternity, supporting the child, acting as father, but Jessica has been deceiving him about biological paternity and using that deception to control and isolate him. Tom let out a long breath. That's a complicated question, Eleanor. In some states, there's a presumption of paternity if a man acknowledges a child as his and acts as a father. But if there was fraud involved, if she deliberately deceived him, that changes things. Does he want to pursue this legally? He's terrified of losing the baby, which is exactly why Jessica has all the power right now. Eleanor, if your son wants any chance at a healthy relationship with this child or at building an actual co-parenting relationship with Jessica based on honesty, he needs to know the truth definitively. And if she's been lying, he needs to decide whether he still wants to pursue paternity, knowing the biological facts. And if he does want to be her father, regardless, then he'll need to establish his rights formally, through the courts if necessary. But first things first, he needs the truth. Can you get a DNA sample? I think so. But Tom, if I do this, if I go behind Jessica's back to get proof, and it turns out Sophia isn't Daniel's biological daughter, what happens? That depends on a lot of factors. Daniel's intentions, Jessica's response, what's in the best interest of the child. But Eleanor, from what you're telling me, this woman is essentially holding your son hostage, using his love for a child. That's not sustainable. Eventually, something will break. I want to be the one who breaks it, I said. On my terms, not hers. Over the next week, I formulated my plan. It required patience, timing, and a bit of deception. Something I wasn't naturally comfortable with, but desperate times called for desperate measures. I called Daniel and apologized, told him I'd overstepped, that I understood he needed to establish his family without interference, that I respected his choices. I could hear the relief in his voice, the hope that maybe things could go back to some semblance of normal. Could I see Sophia one more time? I asked, just to say a proper goodbye before I step back for a while. There was muffled conversation. He was clearly asking Jessica. Then he came back on. This Sunday, 2 hours. And, Mom, thank you for understanding. I spent Saturday preparing. I'd ordered a discreet DNA testing kit online, the kind designed for paternity testing. I needed samples from both Daniel and Sophia. Daniel's would be easy. I still had his toothbrush from when he'd stayed with me during a plumbing emergency at his apartment 2 months ago. But Sophia's would require careful timing. Sunday arrived clear and cold. I drove to Daniel's apartment carrying a bag with the gifts I'd carefully selected: a stuffed rabbit for Sophia, some gourmet coffee for Daniel, and expensive French chocolate for Jessica. All peace offerings, all part of the performance. Jessica answered the door, and I saw her assess the gifts, calculate their value, and decide they were acceptable tribute. "Come in, Eleanor. It's good to see you." Lies came easily to her. I wondered how many she'd told in her life. I spent the first hour being the perfect, deferential grandmother. I complimented Jessica's parenting, admired her apartment, asked her advice about baby care, even though I'd raised a child perfectly well myself. I watched her relax, saw her guard drop incrementally. Daniel had to leave halfway through. Some emergency work call. Perfect. "Let me hold Sophia while you take care of that," I offered. "You must be exhausted." Jessica actually looked grateful as she handed over the baby and disappeared into the bedroom for some blessed quiet. I had maybe 10 minutes alone with Sophia. Moving quickly but carefully, I pulled out a clean cotton swab from my pocket, the same kind included in the DNA test kit. I gently rubbed it against the inside of Sophia's cheek, collecting cells. She made a small noise of protest, but didn't cry. I sealed the swab in its container and slipped it back into my pocket. Just as I finished, Jessica returned, looking refreshed. "She's been so good," I said, handing Sophia back. "You've done an amazing job with her." More lies, but necessary ones. When I left that afternoon, I had everything I needed. That evening, I packaged the samples according to the kit instructions and sent them to the lab with expedited processing. Results in 5 days. Those 5 days were among the longest of my life. I gardened obsessively, cleaned my house from top to bottom twice, and barely slept. I kept my phone close, checking for updates from the lab portal every few hours. Finally, on Thursday afternoon, I received an email. Results ready. I logged into the portal with shaking hands and opened the report. Probability of paternity, 0.90%. Conclusion: the tested man, Daniel Morrison, is excluded as the biological father of the tested child, Sophia Martin. The probability of paternity is 0%. There it was. Scientific proof that my son had been deceived, manipulated, and controlled based on a fundamental lie. I printed the report, made several copies, and called Tom Bradford. I have the key results. Daniel is not the biological father. How do you want to proceed? I want to confront Jessica, with Daniel present. I want her to know that her lies are over, and that she no longer has the power she thinks she has. Eleanor, be very careful. If she feels cornered, there's no telling what she might do. That's a risk I'm willing to take. Tom, can you be present, as legal witness and counsel? When? This Sunday. I'll arrange it. I called Daniel that evening. I need you to do something for me, and I need you to trust me completely. Mom, what? This Sunday, I need you to tell Jessica that I want to apologize formally, that I want to talk about establishing proper boundaries and expectations going forward. Tell her I want to have a serious conversation about being the kind of grandmother she's comfortable with. Make it sound like I'm capitulating completely. Why? Because I'm done with half-truths and manipulation. Sunday, we're going to have a conversation where everyone tells the complete truth. All of us. Mom, if you're planning to confront her about the paternity thing, Daniel, do you want to spend the rest of your life living a lie, being controlled through fear? Being isolated from everyone who loves you? Silence. Trust me, I said. Please. Sunday arrived with December snow falling gently outside. I dressed carefully, not my usual casual wear, but the elegant pantsuit I'd worn to Robert's funeral, armor for battle. Tom Bradford arrived at my house at noon, and we drove to Daniel's apartment together. Daniel had done as I asked, told Jessica I wanted a serious conversation about boundaries and my role in Sophia's life. Jessica had agreed, probably thinking she'd finally broken me, that I was coming to accept my diminished position. She was about to learn otherwise. Daniel answered the door looking nervous. Tom's presence clearly surprised him. Mom, what's going on? Why is Tom here? Let's go inside, sweetheart. Jessica was in the living room, Sophia napping in a bassinet nearby. She stood when we entered, her expression shifting from confused to wary when she saw Tom. What is this? She demanded. This is the truth, I said calmly. Please sit down. We all need to have a conversation. I don't know what you think you're doing, but sit down. Something in my voice made her comply. Daniel sat next to her on the couch, looking between us with growing alarm. Tom and I remained standing. I reached into my bag and pulled out the DNA test results, placing them on the coffee table in front of Jessica. What is this? Daniel asked, though I think he knew. This is a paternity test. I collected DNA samples from you and from Sophia 3 weeks ago. The results came back Thursday. Jessica's face had gone white. You had no right. I had every right to protect my son from someone who's been lying to him since the day they met. Daniel picked up the report with shaking hands. I watched him read it, watched the confirmation of what he'd already suspected drain the color from his face. 0%, he whispered. I'm not her father. No, I said gently. Biologically, you're not. You bitch! Jessica was on her feet, shaking with rage. You had no right to test my daughter without my permission. Your daughter, I repeated. Interesting how quickly you drop the pretense when you're caught. Get out, both of you. Get out of my home. Actually, Tom interjected quietly, this is Daniel's home, his apartment, his name on the lease. Jessica whirled on Daniel. Tell them to leave. Tell her to get out and mind her own business. But Daniel was staring at the DNA report like it held the secrets of the universe. Who's her father? He asked, his voice hollow. Who's Sophia's real father? Jessica's mouth opened and closed. That's none of your business. None of my business? I've been supporting your child, claiming her as mine, restructuring my entire life around her, and it's none of my business? You wanted this, Jessica shouted. You were so pathetically grateful to be included in her life, so desperate for a family that you didn't ask hard questions. That's on you. The cruelty of it, the calculated coldness, was breathtaking. I saw Daniel flinch like he'd been struck. You used me, he said slowly. You found a lonely, desperate man, and you used him. I gave you what you wanted. A child. A family. What does it matter whose DNA she has? It matters because you lied. Daniel's voice cracked. It matters because you manipulated me, isolated me from my mother, threatened me with losing Sophia if I didn't comply with your every demand. It matters because this whole relationship has been built on deception. And what are you going to do about it? Jessica's voice turned poisonous. You have no legal rights to Sophia. She's not yours. I can walk out of here right now and you'll never see her again. Is that what you want? I watched my son struggle with this, saw the war between his love for that innocent baby and his recognition of the toxic situation he was trapped in. Actually, Tom spoke up again, that's not entirely accurate. Mr. Morrison has been acting as father to this child for 4 months. He's provided financial support, care, and has been recognized by medical professionals and family as the father. In many jurisdictions, that establishes certain rights regardless of biological relationship, particularly if there was fraud involved in the initial representation of paternity. Jessica turned her venom on Tom. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you of legal realities. If this case went to family court, a judge would be very interested to learn that you deliberately deceived Mr. Morrison about paternity, used that deception to control and isolate him, and are now threatening to remove the child he's bonded with as punishment for discovering your lies. I'll tell them he's unstable, that he's trying to claim a child that isn't his, that his mother is interfering and causing problems. Please do, I said coldly. I'd love for you to explain to a judge why you refused genetic screening that your pediatrician recommended, why you provided false medical history about genetic disorders on the paternal side, why you isolated the supposed father from his family. I'm sure that will go very well for you. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Jessica's face. What do you want? She asked, the fight draining out of her. The truth, Daniel said, finding his voice again. All of it. Who's Sophia's father? Why did you choose me? What was the plan here? Jessica sank back onto the couch, and for a moment she looked younger, more vulnerable. But I didn't trust it. She'd shown herself to be an expert manipulator. His name is Marcus Carrington, she said finally. He's a partner at a venture capital firm, married, 3 kids already. We had an affair. I got pregnant. He offered me money for an abortion. I refused. He made it clear he'd deny paternity, tie me up in legal battles for years, destroy my reputation in the industry. He has resources I can't match. So you found someone else, Daniel said flatly, someone who could be manipulated into claiming responsibility. I found someone who wanted a family, Jessica shot back. Someone who got to be a father, which is what you said you wanted. Not like this. Not based on lies. Does it matter? You love Sophia, I know you do. Are you really going to abandon her just because she doesn't share your DNA? It was a manipulation. I could see it clearly. But it was also hitting every one of Daniel's vulnerabilities. This isn't about abandoning Sophia, I interjected. This is about whether my son is going to allow himself to continue being controlled and abused by someone who's proven she can't be trusted. Abused? Jessica laughed bitterly. I haven't abused anyone. Daniel has had the privilege of being Sophia's father. That's not abuse. You isolated him from his family. You threatened to take away a child he'd bonded with if he didn't comply with your demands. You lied about fundamental facts and used those lies to control him. In what world is that not abuse? In the world where he got exactly what he wanted, a child to raise. Everything else is just details. The chilling thing was, I could see she actually believed this. In her mind, she'd done nothing wrong. She'd simply arranged circumstances to get what she needed, and everyone else should be grateful for their assigned roles. Here's what's going to happen, Tom said, stepping forward. We're going to establish some new parameters. First, Daniel needs time to process this information and decide what he wants to do. Does he want to pursue formal custody or visitation arrangements despite the lack of biological relationship? Does he want to step back? Those are his decisions to make, not yours. He's not listed on the birth certificate, Jessica countered. He has no legal standing. Actually, that works in our favor, Tom replied smoothly, because it means you've been accepting financial support from someone you knew wasn't the father. That could be construed as fraud. I'm sure the California bar would be interested in how a marketing professional managed to afford a luxury apartment, designer clothes, and an upscale lifestyle while on maternity leave with no partner listed on the birth certificate. Jessica's eyes narrowed. What are you implying? I'm implying that Marcus Carrington might be very interested to learn that the woman he paid off to have an abortion actually kept the child and is raising her with another man's financial support. I wonder how his wife would feel about that. You wouldn't. Try me, Tom said pleasantly. My client has been nothing but honest and generous. You've built your entire situation on lies and manipulation. In a credibility fight, you lose. The room fell silent, except for Sophia's soft breathing from the bassinet. I watched the calculation happening behind Jessica's eyes, weighing her options, looking for angles. What do you want? She asked again, but this time her voice was defeated. We want the truth from here forward, I said. No more lies, no more manipulation. Daniel deserves to make an informed choice about his involvement in Sophia's life. If he chooses to pursue a parental relationship, despite the biological facts, you will facilitate that fairly and honestly. You will not use Sophia as a weapon or leverage. And if I refuse, then we pursue legal action, Tom said. We file for fraud. We contact Marcus Carrington directly. We make this as messy and public as necessary. Your choice. Jessica looked at Daniel, perhaps hoping to find an ally, someone she could still manipulate. But my son's face was closed off, unreadable. I need time, Daniel said quietly, to think about what I want. What's actually best for Sophia, not what's best for you or even what I want. You can't just... Yes, I can. You don't get to control this anymore, Jessica. Tom is right. You've been lying since day one. You don't get to set the terms going forward. I watched my son stand up straighter, saw some of the weight lift from his shoulders. He was taking back his power, his agency, his right to make informed decisions about his own life. I'm going to stay with my mother for a few days, he continued. I need space to think. We can communicate through Tom about next steps. But Jessica, one thing is absolutely clear. The way things have been, the lies and control and isolation, that's over. Whether or not I choose to be in Sophia's life, it won't be on those terms. Never again. Jessica opened her mouth to protest, but something in Daniel's expression stopped her. We left shortly after, Daniel packing a bag while Tom and I waited in the living room. I took one last look at Sophia, sleeping peacefully in her bassinet, unaware of the storm surrounding her young life. She deserves better than this, I murmured to Tom. They all do, he replied. In the car on the way back to my house, Daniel sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window as snow continued to fall. I thought I was building a family, he said eventually. I thought I'd finally found my place. You were being used, I said gently. There's a difference between finding family and being manipulated into serving someone else's needs. But I do love Sophia. That part wasn't a lie. When I hold her, when she looks at me, that's real. Love isn't enough if it comes with the cost of your dignity and autonomy, Daniel. And it's not fair to Sophia either, raising her in an environment built on lies and control. So what do? You take time, you think. You decide what you can live with and what you can't. And whatever you decide, I'll support you. He turned to look at me, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, Mom, for shutting you out, for choosing her over you, for being so desperate that I let myself be manipulated. I reached over and squeezed his hand. You wanted a family. There's no shame in that. The shame is all hers, for exploiting that desire. Over the next few days, Daniel stayed with me. We talked for hours about Jessica, about Sophia, about what he really wanted from life versus what he'd been willing to settle for. Tom came by twice to discuss legal options. The truth was, Daniel had very few legal rights to Sophia. He wasn't on the birth certificate, there was no biological relationship, and he'd only been acting as father for 4 months. But Jessica also had vulnerabilities, her fraud, the financial support she'd accepted, the potential complications if Marcus Carrington learned the truth. It comes down to this, Tom explained on the 3rd day. Do you want to fight for formal custody or visitation rights? Because that's possible, but it will be expensive, time-consuming, and uncertain. Or do you want to negotiate an informal agreement with Jessica, backed by the threat of exposing her lies if she doesn't cooperate fairly? What about what's best for Sophia? Daniel asked. That's the question, isn't it? Tom leaned back in his chair. Right now, Sophia is 4 months old. She's bonded with you as a father figure, but she's young enough that separating wouldn't cause lasting damage if it happened soon. The longer you wait, the harder it becomes. So, I should just walk away? Abandon her? I'm not saying that. I'm saying you need to think about whether you can have a healthy relationship with this child, given the circumstances. Can you co-parent with Jessica, knowing what you know? Can you trust her to be honest and fair going forward? Can you build something positive from this foundation of lies? Daniel was quiet for a long time. I don't think I can, he said finally. Every time I look at Sophia, I'll think about how I was manipulated. Every interaction with Jessica will be colored by her deception, and Sophia deserves better than being raised in that environment. She deserves better than a father who's there out of obligation and wounded pride, rather than genuine, freely chosen love. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever heard my son say, and one of the bravest. There's something else to consider, I said quietly. Sophia has a biological father, Marcus Carrington. Right now, he's escaping his responsibilities, letting you take them on instead. Is that fair to you? Is it fair to Sophia? You think we should tell him? Daniel looked shocked. I think he has a right to know his daughter exists, and a responsibility to support her. And I think Jessica shouldn't get to have it both ways, rejecting him because he wouldn't give her what she wanted, but then forcing that role on you without your informed consent. Tom nodded slowly. It's a nuclear option, but it's worth considering. If Carrington knows, if his wife knows, Jessica loses all her leverage, and Sophia might actually end up with her real father taking responsibility. Or he denies paternity and nothing changes except Jessica's life gets harder, Daniel countered. Is that our problem? I asked. She created this situation through lies and manipulation. She chose to keep Sophia knowing the biological father wanted no part of it. She chose to deceive you rather than be honest. Why should we protect her from the consequences of her choices? Over the next week, we debated and discussed and weighed options. Finally, Daniel made his decision. I want out, he said, completely. I'll support whatever legal claim Carrington might bring once he knows, but I'm done being Jessica's puppet. Tom, can you draft a letter making it clear that I'm aware Sophia isn't my biological daughter, that I was deceived about paternity, and that I'm terminating any informal parental relationship effective immediately? I can do that. And Mom, I think you're right. Carrington should know. Maybe he won't step up, but he should at least have to make that choice with full information. Tom did some discreet investigating and discovered that Marcus Carrington was exactly who Jessica had described: wealthy, married, prominent in the venture capital world. Tom drafted 2 letters, one to Jessica, formally notifying her of Daniel's withdrawal from any parental role and making clear that any future financial support requests would be met with legal action for fraud. The other to Marcus Carrington, informing him that he had a 4-month-old daughter and that the mother had been deceiving another man into assuming his responsibilities. We sent both letters simultaneously, certified mail, on a Monday morning in late December. Jessica called Daniel's phone 63 times that day. He didn't answer. She sent texts ranging from apologetic to threatening to pleading. He didn't respond. Finally, she showed up at my house at 9 p.m. with Sophia in her car seat, banging on the door. I answered, but didn't invite her in. "Please," she said, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked genuinely desperate. "Please, I need to talk to Daniel. He's said everything he needs to say. I'll change. I'll be different. I'll include you. I'll be honest. Just please don't do this. Don't abandon Sophia." "You abandoned her," I said coldly. "When you built her entire family structure on lies, when you used her as a tool to control and manipulate, when you chose your own convenience over what was best for her." "I'm her mother." "Then be a better one. Tell her real father the truth. Build her life on something honest instead of this house of cards you've constructed. He won't want her. He made that clear. Then make him say it. Make him look at her face and reject her. Make him take responsibility for that choice instead of hiding behind your lies." Jessica crumpled, sliding down to sit on my porch steps, Sophia's car seat beside her. "I can't do this alone," she whispered. "You should have thought of that before you pushed away the one person who was trying to help you honestly." I closed the door and returned inside, where Daniel stood in the hallway looking shattered. "Is she still out there?" I looked out the window. "No, she's leaving." He nodded, then went back to the guest room he'd been staying in. I heard the door close quietly. 2 weeks later, Tom called with an update. "Carrington's lawyer contacted me. He's demanding a paternity test." "Good," I said. "Let him take responsibility." The test was done, and it confirmed what we all knew. Marcus Carrington was Sophia's biological father. What we didn't expect was what happened next. Carrington's wife, Claire, learned about the affair and the baby. Rather than divorcing him immediately, as might be expected, she apparently made him a deal. Acknowledge Sophia, provide financial support, but maintain distance to protect their other children from the scandal. Jessica would receive generous child support and a settlement, but the Carringtons would not pursue custody or visitation. It was cold, transactional, practical, and in some ways more honest than anything Jessica had constructed with Daniel. Jessica called one last time, about 6 weeks after everything fell apart. "I just wanted you to know, I'm moving. Marcus's settlement is enough that I can relocate, start over somewhere else." "That's probably for the best," I said. "I want to say I'm sorry, but I don't think you'd believe me." "You're right, I wouldn't." For what it's worth, Daniel would have been a good father, better than Marcus will ever be, even with all the money. Yes, he would have, if you'd given him the chance to choose it freely, honestly, but you didn't. "No, I didn't." She hung up, and that was the last I ever heard from Jessica Martin. Daniel struggled for months afterward. He saw a therapist, worked through his feelings about the deception, the loss, the manipulation. Slowly, painfully, he began to rebuild his life on a foundation of truth instead of desperate hope. "I think the hardest part," he told me one Sunday afternoon as we worked in my garden together, "is realizing how much of myself I was willing to sacrifice just to avoid being alone." "That's not weakness," I said, pulling weeds from around the tomato plants. "That's human. We all want connection, family, love. You just had the misfortune of meeting someone who exploited that instead of honoring it." "Do you think she ever actually cared about me? Even a little?" I considered this carefully. "I think she cared about what you could provide. Safety, stability, legitimacy. Whether that's the same as caring about you as a person, I don't know. Maybe in her mind, it was. It wasn't enough. No, sweetheart, it wasn't. He pulled off his gardening gloves and sat back on his heels. I wonder sometimes how Sophia's doing, whether she's happy, whether she'll ever know the truth about where she came from. Those aren't your burdens to carry anymore, I reminded him gently. You made the right choice, stepping away from a toxic situation. Sophia has her biological father's financial support and her mother. Whatever happens from here is their responsibility, not yours. I know, I just wish what? I wish I could have been her father, the right way, honestly, without all the lies and manipulation. She was innocent in all of this. She was, but loving her couldn't make the situation healthy, and staying wouldn't have been good for any of you, not Jessica, and ultimately not Sophia either. We worked in silence for a while, the afternoon sun warm on our backs. Eventually, Daniel spoke again. Thank you, Mom, for not letting me stay trapped, for having the courage to find out the truth when I was too afraid to look. That's what mothers do, I said simply. We protect our children, even when they're 42 years old and think they don't need protection. He laughed, and it was the first genuine laugh I'd heard from him in months. Now, sitting in my garden on a warm spring afternoon nearly a year later, I think about everything that happened. About the grandson I gained and lost in the space of 4 months. About my son, who learned a hard lesson about desperation and manipulation and the importance of building relationships on truth. Daniel is doing well now. He started dating again, slowly and carefully. He's in therapy, working through his tendency to sacrifice too much for the promise of connection. And he visits me every Sunday, helping with the garden, sharing meals, talking about his life without the weight of deception crushing him. I think about Jessica sometimes, wonder where she is, how Sophia is growing up. I hope she's learned something from the wreckage of her lies, though I'm not optimistic. Some people never learn, never see their own role in the destruction they cause. And I think about the phone call that started everything, about Daniel's voice saying, "She's already due next month," and my question, "When do I meet her?" And his answer that sent my entire world tilting, "At the hospital." I should have known then, should have heard the warning bells in that answer. But sometimes we don't want to see what's directly in front of us, especially when it threatens something precious. The truth, I've learned, is rarely comfortable. It often hurts. It destroys the illusions we've built to protect ourselves from harsh realities. But it's also the only foundation stable enough to build a real life on. Jessica wanted the appearance of a family without the honesty that makes family real. She wanted the benefits of Daniel's love and commitment without respecting him enough to give him the truth. And in the end, her lies destroyed everything she'd tried to build. My son learned that lesson painfully, but he learned it. And now he's building something new, something honest, something true. As for me, I learned that sometimes silence isn't enough. Sometimes you have to speak. Sometimes you have to act. Sometimes you have to be willing to destroy what looks comfortable to protect what's real. I stayed silent at first, watching and waiting. But when I finally spoke, when I finally acted, I made sure it counted. And I'd do it again. Because that's what mothers do. We protect. We fight. We insist on truth even when lies are easier. And we never, ever apologize for it. The sun is setting now, painting my garden in shades of gold and amber. Tomorrow, Daniel is coming for dinner. He's bringing someone he wants me to meet, a woman he's been seeing for a few months. Her name is Sarah, and from what he tells me, she's honest, kind, and treats him like he deserves to be treated. I'm looking forward to meeting her. But I'm also prepared to ask hard questions, to look for red flags, to protect my son if protection is needed. Because I've learned that love without truth is just manipulation wearing a prettier mask. And I'll never let anyone manipulate my family again. Not while I'm still breathing, not ever.